Right, well, you might think that if you bulldozed a forest and you put a motorway on top of it,
yes,
that would be the last that you would see of those trees.
But no, as George has been finding out, because with nature, with a little bit of help, it can bounce back in a truly surprising way.
On January 9th, 1996, a year after the controversial Newbury bypass order was signed, bulldozers fired up, beginning one of the largest mass popular protests Britain had ever seen.
There is no excuse for destroying all this wildlife and beauty.
The bypass was to condemn 10,000 mature trees and almost 360 acres of ancient woodland to be razed to the ground. Thousands descended on Snelsmore Common, the epicentre of the demonstrations.
This is dictatorial! This is the bulldozer of state!
Ultimately, the Newbury protests failed and this bypass was built. But 2 decades later, what remains of the forest isn't just archive of the protest, but the living descendants of those ancient trees. Phil Pritchard was one of the protesters.
The impact of non-violent direct action against road building during the 1990s, there were a lot of noisy defeats, but there were a lot of quiet victories. So we heard about what was happening here, came here at the request of local campaigners and supported them to set up camps and build tree houses. Most people thought that's the end of the protest, but later that year, people came back and set up little vegetable growing gardens, permaculture plots along the route of the bypass. There was a lengthy period where the bare land that had just been burnt and scoured by the bulldozers was left. The land responded by thousands of tiny, dormant acorns, sweet chestnut seeds sprouting, and a little shin-high forest grew. We just became aware that if we left them there, they were just going to get tarmacked and dug up. So we potted them up, and they went off all around the country.
Phil planted some of the rescued saplings in his old allotment that he hasn't seen for 5 years.
So there's 3 oaks and 1 silver birch. Fantastic. And the last time I saw them, they were a little bit taller than me, and now they are massive.
20 years growth, that's a substantial tree now, isn't it? So they are the descendants of the ones that were cut down.
So apparently the last 2 years they've had acorns, so that's just really special.
I know you shouldn't really, but
having a good hug.
You just really want to hug them. Because they're just such gorgeous trees. But some of what Phil describes as his RefuTrees went further afield, 200 miles away to Keverall Farm in Cornwall.
That's amazing. I didn't realise a tree could grow that much in 20 years, because there's a little circle of oak trees around it. And then this big sweet chestnut. That's amazing. There's pictures from the day we planted them where Russ and Fran are helping. Russ is throwing up his arms in jubilation, and that's sort of what I feel now. It's just the joy of knowing that the tree that was going to be destroyed is actually growing well.
Guy Shrubsole was 11 when he and his parents took part in the bypass protests.
I remember going on lots of walks in the forests and woodlands that were destined to be cut down to make way for the road. And on one of those walks, I picked up a pine cone and took it back home and grew the seeds from it. And as you can see, they've grown a lot bigger. They've become mature pine trees. One of them we once used as our Christmas tree, and then it grew a bit too big, and so we planted it on. Remembering the scene of devastation that I'd seen at the bypass when they'd cut down all the trees, and seeing all the protests, I was inspired really to go on and do that myself later in life.
20 feet above the northbound carriageway stands an old oak tree named Middle Oak by the people who lived up it for months. It was the only one of 10,000 mature trees to be spared. Well, there's no doubt that the tree climbers swayed public opinion, and later political policy changed too, virtually halting the construction of major new roads for a generation. As a tree lover, it's really great to see Middle Oak still here, but also to know that the descendants of the trees that were lost live on.
And incredible, given the chance to see how quickly those oaks can grow. Beautiful, that. Thanks, George.
Yes, thanks, George.